Good morning, Galaxians. Welcome to another live edition of the Galaxy CDs, Rocks, and Flips Reseller Talk podcast from the Bat Cave. Let me know in the chat if you can hear me. I've been getting some funny readings on my microphone this morning, so I'm not completely convinced that it's actually working. Nothing special planned for today. Forgive me if I don't sound particularly great. I am feeling a little under the weather, fighting a little bit of cold. Happy birthday to me. Was at a party over the weekend, and the only child that was there was apparently sick, and now my entire family has a cold. So that's cool. Some quick good mornings. Good morning, Miss Lachey, Operani. Good morning, Media Picker. Thank you. Appreciate the birthday wishes. Thank you for the update on the sound. I appreciate it. Lord Jake Ryan is here. Glad to know the audio is coming through. I don't know why the mic was just showing like no output whatsoever on the little meter thing on StreamYard. So let me know if you have any questions or anything you would like to discuss today. There's been quite a bit going on over the last couple of weeks. Obviously, the big news for this week was Poshmark undoing what they did a couple of weeks ago and reverting back to their original fee structure, which goes into effect tomorrow. So they'll be back to 20% of the item price charged solely to the seller, no buyer fees. They also did away with the, whatever it was, the Posh Pass discounted shipping thing, because that was part of the incentive of the fee changes. So that is going away tomorrow also. So big changes over at Poshmark. Let me know in the chat what you think of all of that, especially if you happen to sell over there. That was pretty wild. To be fair, I talked about it when I did the initial show that I wasn't sure that that was the right strategy. And to their credit, within a couple of weeks, they realized that it was going to be a major problem for them, and they have reversed course. Mercari, on the other hand, keeps doubling down. They keep tweaking it and making little changes to how they do it, trying to figure out how to make it work. And I'm not convinced that they're going to be able to do that. So let me know again in the chat what you think of that as well. Definitely interesting. Let's hop in here. Jeff, thank you so much for the birthday wishes. Bill, thank you. I appreciate it. Mel, thank you. I hope you got my message earlier today. I do have a question about shipping multiple hardbacks. Do I need to wrap them individually? Use bubble wrap. It's a 12-book series that will bring over $100 when I list it. When I do sets, I do wrap them individually. Depending on the value of the set, I may do bubble wrap, or I may just I use newsprint, which does a pretty good job, especially if they're going to be packed in there pretty well. So, but yes, I would probably wrap them individually and then put them in the box, and then use whatever air cushions or newsprint or whatever for void fill, so they're not jumbled around in the box. But yeah, I would probably wrap them individually. Bill Wilkinson says, I think the dream for big sites is to have both the buyer and the seller paying fees so that they can alternate years, raising the fee one each with less notice. Could very well be. It's going to be really interesting to watch now that you've seen the first big player capitulate on going down that path of the buyer fees. Mercari obviously is sticking with it. Depop did a similar kind of split. Transaction fees, the actual credit card processing fee, is still handled by the seller, but the service fee is handled by the buyer, which is kind of a different take on it. That might be an option. Like I said in the episode Monday, finding some other fee incentive for sellers, to me, probably makes the most sense, because I just don't think buyers want to pay that fee. I know from my own experience, like when I hop on Mercari and look for something and I see that fee, I'm just like, you know what, I'm out. I just can't do it. So I don't know. Let me know what you think as a buyer. Is that something you'd be willing to pay? I don't do enough research to go see if that's still the best deal. I just see that fee and naturally have an adverse reaction to it. So Media Picker says, I've actually made 2 sales in 2 weeks on Mercari. My Mercari sales are pretty consistent, 3, 4, 5 a week. Nothing, no great shakes over there, but it hasn't gotten worse. It hasn't gotten better. It's, again, books are not a big category over there, and that's where 80+% of my inventory is. So I'm not seeing much change over there, but again, as a buyer, I don't like it. eBay should follow suit and stop destroying their site in the name of profit initiatives, which is their corporate speak for fleecing sellers, says Zachariah. Yeah, eBay is probably the worst right now, just in terms of how many fees there are. They particularly punish media sellers hard. That's among the highest fee category on eBay. But you've got that fee. If you participate in promoted listings, you've got that fee as well. If you want to do offsite ads and promoted listings advanced, there's just so many things that eBay is charging. And again, their strategy right now appears to be clearly different than everybody else. They're still really focused on their vertical strategies and their enthusiast buyers, and kind of general sellers, like most of us probably are kind of an afterthought, and they're just trying to maximize what they can get off of us. So I love eBay. It allows me to make a living doing this rather than doing something else, having to work for somebody else. But it's expensive to do business over there. Annette had made the comment, a lot of folks thought that the Poshmark 20% fee was high, but my average fee on eBay runs month to month anywhere from 19 to 21%, depending on how many items I sell through promoted listings. So that number's pretty consistent. I would love if that number would get down to 15 or even 10. That would be outstanding. And I think, like we talked about with Max, these sites might be missing the boat. There are sellers who are put off by those fees that would list more items or would just sell there at all if they could do it more cheaply. And I think that is probably something we're going to have to see down the road, particularly, in my opinion, over on eBay. You're welcome. Thank you for the birthday wishes. Yes. And at my age, the alternative is, it's not that far. I don't want to say over the hill, but that's kind of where it's at. I would pay a Costco type fee one time per year, and they've got something like that. eBay does that. If I'm not mistaken, there's a program like that in Australia. There might be something similar in the UK where there is a kind of a one-time annual fee, and then that's it. So that would be an option as well. Ms. Lachey says, for large sets, I stopped wrapping individually and now split them out into zipped plastic bags. There you go. Found some really sturdy ones at Dollar Tree. So that's another interesting approach that you could do. I don't know. I guess if they're super cheap and you're not doing it real often, that's probably a good option. I've always got bubble wrap around for other things that I might sell, and that by the foot is super cheap, relatively speaking. Mel says she did get a message, excited and not confused. Good. Mel had asked about what sizes of bubble mailers I use and what sizes of boxes. And I sent her a message directly. I do have a video back in my catalog somewhere from a couple of years ago of the various bubble mailers I use. But for anybody that's interested, I essentially use 4 sizes. I use the size 0, which is about a 10 by 6. Size 2, which is roughly 12 by 9, a size 4, which is roughly 14 by 10, and a size 5, which is almost 16 by 11. And that covers about 99% of what I do. I did have one this morning, a big coffee table size book that I took 2 of those size 5s and cut down the side to make one big bubble mailer. I probably have to do that once or twice a week for a really big item, but that covers almost everything. And then I don't need to buy, any more mailers. I do buy them 200 to 500 at a time. So I buy a lot of mailers, but those 4 sizes seem for me to cover just about everything. And then for boxes, I use a few different size boxes. The ones I probably use the most are a 10 by 14 by 4, which covers just about anything you would want to ship in media, in books. If you got a couple of books or 3, they'll generally fit in there. I do have a 10 by 8 by 6 and a 9 by 6 by 6 as well. And then I keep some really big, like 16 by 12 by 8 on hand if I'm shipping a set. So that covers those. Usually those bigger ones like that I get from eBay with a quarterly coupon for their supplies for having a store. So I have very little cost in those. Zachariah says, I love or loved eBay, but wish they would see the light and return to the roots, which was small sellers and unique one-off items, niche and collectibles. Yeah, there was somebody else that was commenting on an earlier video that said the same thing. I mean, eBay was all about collectibles, not trading cards specifically, but all kinds of collectibles, from whatever, plates, salt shakers, whatever it was, those unusual one-off things that were sold in a lot of cases by individual sellers, which is something, again, in the UK that you're trying to see them get back into, is private sellers, individual sellers, becoming more active on the marketplace. And they did that, at least for now, by eliminating seller fees for private sellers. I don't know that that's the long-term answer, but some way to incentivize those kind of folks and those kind of buyers to come back to eBay, I think would be really helpful. They have tried to compete with Amazon. They're going after like new goods and an area where I don't know that they're competitive. I don't know that they're top of mind for most people when they're thinking of that type of item. And I think a return to those roots would probably be hugely beneficial for them. Den Decor Depot, good morning and happy birthday. Thank you. Love the 12 by 9 by 5 boxes, cubic rate breakpoint. So there you go. The 14 by 10 by 4 is kind of a similar size box, and we'll do kind of the same thing. And it is real important to kind of watch where those cubic rates, once you get above a certain size, then you get into dimensional rate and it gets a little expensive. Mel says, do you wrap in newspaper and then put in a bubble mailer? Yes, every item I ship gets wrapped, except for CDs and DVDs, because they've already got either a plastic case or a plastic cover on them. But all the books and everything, paperbacks and hardcovers, I wrap in newsprint, and then they go in a bubble mailer. I do follow another seller online that I see he uses regular poly mailers, and he wraps everything in bubble wrap first. He finds that to be a little more economical. I've never run the math. I just like bubble mailers better. So that's what I use, but that would be another option to look at to see what makes the most financial sense for you. Having rolls of bubble mailer or bubble wrap laying around and then regular poly mailers kind of achieves the same thing. That looks like the last of the current comments in the chat. So the day today was, I'm going to kind of try to do some listings here. So if you have anything to add, feel free to drop it in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to do, I've got a box here that I picked up at an estate sale the other day. I was at a sale and had picked up a pretty good stack of books, and the guy grabs me and he says, hey, I got 2 boxes of stuff over here that I was holding for someone else. I've been holding it for a couple of weeks and he hasn't come to one of my sales. Would you be interested? And I looked, and it looked like there was some pretty good stuff in there. So he gave me a good deal on these 2 boxes of stuff. And that's what I've got here. So we're going to work on those. There was a lot. I listed a lot of that stuff yesterday. Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, like centennial and sesquicentennial stuff. Really interesting mix of stuff. It also had, this is not in particularly good shape, but a couple of these like U.S. Navy and U.S. Air Force training yearbooks. So I don't know if this is going to be anything or not, but we'll take a look. I don't know what year this is from. Or it may just be a history of. So 7, 8 plus shipping. I'm into this for like 50 cents. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Let's see if I can figure out what group this is from. Usually they have right on the title page what class group it is, but I'm not seeing that on this one. hold this one out and look at that again later when I can find a little more information on it. Need it, but just bought another 150 CDs, about 30 cents a piece. That's a good deal. What kind of CDs are selling right now? I've sold a few old punk and ska CDs over the last week or so, which is kind of interesting. Just never know. Here's another one of these. The Compass. Company 142 from 1954. So you can see this one says very clearly what group it's from, which is really helpful. That one, it may be in there somewhere, but I didn't see it right off. And I'm not going to make you watch me for half an hour as I try to figure it out. So here's one. It's at an auction starting at 10 bucks. There are a few others, different companies that are like $7 and $8. Again, I'm into it for 50 cents, so I can probably make that work. Here you go. Here's one for 25. That seems like it's probably on the high end. Let's see if there's any sales. Nothing sold. So I would say I probably want to be on the lower end of that mess. So I'm going to do like $9.99 plus shipping on this and just call it a day. Some of these old military yearbooks can actually bring pretty decent money. I've had some as high as $40 and $50. These don't seem to be quite that high for some reason, but if I could eke 10 bucks out of a 50-cent initial investment, I would take that. So oops, that's wrong. I've only had to copy that like 4 times, but that's all right. What am I working on here? Actually, I'm going to do $12.99 on this. And one down. Let's hop back over here into the chat. Big Dre, good morning. Thanks for coming out. I'm going to start buying boxes from Uline because I'm selling vacuums and it's hard to find free boxes that size. Uline is good on those bigger sizes. I have found they can be kind of expensive on like the smaller sizes, like what I normally use. I'm buying almost all of my stuff from value mailers on eBay. I've looked at Uline, I've looked at Granger, I've looked at a couple other places, and they are almost always the cheapest that I can find in the quantities that I'm looking to buy. So that's who I've been using, value mailers on eBay. Den Decor Depot, new eBay store that is. I'm kept at 5 sale per day average despite adding 25% more inventory since the June summer update changes. Uh, you mean you're just not getting more than 5 sales a day, or you think there is some kind of hard cap? Mine varies so wildly. Like a couple of days ago, I had 5 sales. Last night, I had 17 overnight. So it's just totally random when they come and how much activity there is. I suppose maybe that comes from I don't do a lot of listing on the weekend. I'll do 5 to 10 on Saturday. I don't list anything on Sunday. That's my one day. I really don't do much. Monday is usually a fairly light listing day for me because I've got orders from the weekend that takes a significant amount of time to get them prepped and shipped. So that's usually a light listing day. And then Tuesday, I'm really back on listing heavily. And then it seems like Tuesday night into Wednesday, things pick back up for me and then are good through the weekend. It's so weird. Operating on eBay says, I'm assuming that when you decide on the price, you're factoring in that you will offer a discount to interested buyers. I try to watch, like on that one, there's an auction starting at $10. So if I do $12.99 with a lowest acceptable offer of $10, I'm right in that guy's window. There were a couple others, different companies that were in the $6 to $8 range, so I'm not overpriced. But yeah, I'm trying to be kind of in that window. The only other one that was on there was like $25.99 with free shipping. And there's no sales history on that particular book of any year or company. So it's obviously not a high demand item. Trying to get $24, $25 out of it probably doesn't make sense. At $12.99 with a competitive minimum acceptable offer, I'm kind of in that window where it looks like everybody else is at, and mine looks like it's probably in a little better shape. So again, assuming that anybody is ever looking for that, and those can be really slow sellers, I'm probably priced about right on that one, I think. Oh, and don't forget to upload your government ID on Etsy so you can get paid. You have 6 days. I did that a long time ago. They go through these fits and starts where they remind everybody they need to do that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's so many government regulations now, particularly if you're trying to sell overseas with identity and whatever that you've got to comply with. I've seen a lot of sellers say that they are, particularly in the UK, that they have already stopped selling to Germany and that they may also consider stop sending things to France because the legal requirements for the paperwork and all that have gotten so out of control that it's just not worth doing. So let me know, anybody here in the US, have you considered likewise suspending shipments to any of those countries? Den Decor Depot, 11, then 5, then 2, then 4, average of 5 a day. Again, just bizarre how it goes. And I've heard people say that before, where they feel like there's a cap, whether it's a daily or a weekly number, that they just don't seem to be able to get beyond that. You have a particularly big, a high dollar item that sells, and it seems like you're throttled for a couple of days until things get back into, if you normally do whatever, $1,000 or $1,500 a week in sales. If you sell an $800 item, at the end of the week, somehow you're still only at $1,000 or $1,500. You didn't really, you didn't make any extra because you had a big sale. It's like, it almost feels like you get throttled. You're a $1,500 seller and that's where you're going to stay, and they do what they need to. That's just me talking, and I see people say the same thing. I don't know that there's any truth to that, but it's so uncanny, as you say, that things seem to stay at a certain level. Let's see what else we got here in this old box. Ringing axes and rocking chairs by Peggy Bancroft, The Story of Barrett Township. Got some notes in there that we don't need to do anything with. Got a little bit of damage on the dust jacket here, which doesn't prevent me from taking a chance on this. A lot of extra stuff. This is one, again, always take a look. I don't know if that's going to be too bright or if you'll be able to see, but there are some underlining, so there are some notes in this that will impact its value a little bit. Not a ton. Pages are actually pretty good. They're kind of yellowish, but based on how they feel, I'm not sure that's not how they were designed to be. So let's see what this bad boy might bring. So 2 listed that I can see here, one for $27.95 plus shipping and another for $30.95 plus shipping. Interesting, if you can see on the screen here, the first one that shows up has the title exactly like it is on the cover, Ringing Axes and the word "and" rocking chairs. And the second one here uses the little "and" symbol, and it does not show up in your search. So this is one of the reasons that I talk about, I always put the title in, unless it's so long that it just won't fit, exactly like it's on the book. Assuming that's how people are going to be searching for it. In this case, because there's so few of this and similar items, they do both show up essentially on the screen, but it actually says results matching fewer words. So if there had been more of these, as there will be in a couple of minutes, that are in there correctly, that one that used the symbol rather than the word to try to save some space is going to be bumped down that initial search result page, which is obviously something you don't want. So this one uses all caps, which eBay says they don't want you to do, so I'll be changing that. This is a case, I suppose you could make the argument, because it is in all caps on the cover, that that's how it should be, but I will follow eBay's guidelines and change that out. Mine does not appear to be in as good a condition as either of those two that are listed, so I will probably list this at $24.99 or best offer to try to be a little bit more competitive on the price, plus the fact that mine's obviously got writing in it. Quite a bit of foxing on that dust jacket on the flap, so I want to get a picture of that. Limited first edition, 1,500 copies. That might be helpful. I'm going to take a picture there where there's some notations. So again, I try to get as much in there as I can. The title, the author, the date. This is limited edition. It is illustrated. It is a hardcover with its dust jacket. So that is, in my view, just about anything anybody would want to know right off the bat about this book. I'm going to change that topic to local history, which in some categories, I think in regular books, it is actually a category. In antiquarian books, it is not. I go ahead and use it anyway. I'm going to call this acceptable because of the wear and the damage on the cover, the foxing and the writing. Nobody should be able to argue that this is not well described. Acceptable cover wear, minor damage to the dust jacket, light tanning of pages, foxing on the flaps, and some notations. So there is essentially everything that is wrong with this book is mentioned in that description. So you've covered your own, you know what. And again, I'm going to price this at $24.99 or best offer. I'm going to do a minimum acceptable offer of 20 bucks, which makes me essentially $8 lower than the other guy if somebody really comes in there low. Let's see what the weight is on this thing. And that's another one done. Hop back in here into the chat. You didn't leave the notes with it. Sold a Bible that had some interesting old church bulletins I left in. If there are things like from the organization, I probably would, but this was something totally unrelated that was just stuck in there, and some literal handwritten notes. It's so bright there with that light. Again, that don't appear to even be related to that were just stuck in there. So no, I would not leave those in there. Again, if it was related, I probably would, or if they look like something of value, I might consider selling them on their own down the road. So that I've done that as well. AI will fix that ampersand. Yeah. We'll see about that. Do you include if that's the first word in the title? I am one that if it'll fit, I put in a and the, if, whatever. I try to put it in exactly as it appears on the item. I know eBay says that those words do not matter in their search, but if you do a search for a book with and without words like a and the at the beginning, it does return different results. So despite what they say, in practice, my experience has been that those words do matter. So I generally will put them in, assuming there's enough room for them to fit. Tommy Trades, hello. Hope all is well. Tuning in from the UK. Welcome. Appreciate it. Personally stopped shipping to Germany already due to the mess of requirements. The impending doom of GPSR rules are real here. Yeah, I've seen a lot of sellers. I did a video, what was it, a couple of weeks ago about the eBay fee thing that got a lot of traction over in the UK, and a lot of sellers commented on that video about those new rules coming into force and how it's going to affect their business. So definitely something to be aware of. Jeff Zenick, have a large envelope, buy my books, which I list, put every piece of paper into to later sell as an ephemera lot. Yep, I've got a stack right here of all kinds of like bookmarks and notes and library cards that I generally keep for Katie Reads, and all kinds of just like random ephemera. And every so often, I will go through it and either put together a lot, or if there's something there of value, go ahead and do that. Big Dre, have a big bag of mailers to ship shirts in. I get those on Amazon, and bubble wrap I get at Walmart for certain items. Yep. Black Cat Flips, hello. Hello to everyone, and thank you for the birthday wishes. I appreciate it. I said I was doing my Whatnot show the other day, and I said I wasn't going to do a show today because I was going to be out for my birthday, though I've reached an age where probably could just as well stop talking about birthdays. Today is 59, so I talked about 40 was not a problem for me. I blew right through 40. 50 was an issue, and I've got a feeling I'm really going to have a problem at 60. Happy birthday. Thank you. I appreciate it. Let's see what we got here. Maybe got time for one more quick listing. If anybody has anything else they would like to discuss, please feel free to leave it in the chat. How are you liking Whatnot? That's a good question. So last night I did a show. I have a bunch of religious tracts, little booklets from a group called the Quiet Hour Missionaries. And these are all from like the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And I'm literally the only person that I can see online that has any of these. I've had them listed on eBay, Mercari, and Etsy for some time. I've sold a few of them here and there over the last year, but nothing great. And I thought that might be an interesting thing to try over on Whatnot. So I put those 25 listings into a show and did not sell a single one. $2 starts. I'm currently trying to sell them for $12.99 a piece on eBay and other sites, and have, like I said, I have sold a few at that price. So I thought for $2 a piece, you might find somebody who was really into like vintage religious paraphernalia, paper ephemera. Nothing. I've done a couple of science fiction shows. I've sold maybe half of the stuff I've had in those shows. Done a couple of vintage and kind of antique books. I've sold a few of those, but at significantly less money than those books probably should be worth. As Max said, who was here on the show last week, you've got to not be afraid to sell a book or two here and there at $1 or $5, even though if you think it's worth 20, 30, 50 bucks. But I'm not sure long term that if the business establishes itself and the audience becomes big enough that those books begin to get anywhere near their actual value, it'd be a little more fun. Right now, it's hard to justify taking a book that I might be able to get $30 or $40 out of on eBay and taking it to Whatnot and selling it for $1 because there was only one person that was interested. So mixed opinions. I like doing the show from that aspect. It's been fun to do. It allowed me to stretch my wings a little bit in terms of doing some production stuff on Whatnot. So that has been fun. Feedback on the shows has been good. Sales, not quite there. I've sold 45 items for probably $60 or $65 total over the course of, I don't know, half a dozen shows. So work in progress. As I said, my plan is to do a couple of shows a week, at least through the holidays, to see if I can get some traction and get some, regular visitors and regular buyers. I've got a couple already on the science fiction side. Again, those are $2, $3, $4 books, but there's nothing there that should be bringing big money, so I'm okay with that. If I can do the same thing on the antique side or the vintage side, then maybe there's something there. But I'm definitely going to run it through the end of the year to see what it does, and then at that time I'll reevaluate how I feel about it, or what items I sell there. I may just stick to science fiction and forego doing higher value antique and vintage. So there's a lot to play with over there. The platform still has some bugs. I've had 2 instances where you can go into a show in advance, and if you see something you want, you can put in a pre-bid on the item. And I've had 2 instances where I did a show and an item that had a pre-bid closed and showed as sold on the pre-bid, But then when I went into my closed sales at the end of the show to ship it, it was not there. So they still have some issues to work out as well. So mixed opinions. I will continue to update you as I do shows through the end of the year, but it's definitely something I want to continue to try. Sometime I would like to watch you list a CD or DVD to see how you inspect it for condition and how you photograph. CDs are pretty straightforward. I generally will take, I actually have some right here. These are some old country CDs that don't have a ton of value. So here we got Chris Ledoux. And basically what I would do if I was going to list this, let's look it up. It's been in that pile over there for quite a while. Let's see if maybe it's worth any more money now than it was when I looked at it previously. Okay, so $4.91 with free shipping. Even if this goes out ground advantage, it's going to be every bit of $4 to ship. So this is not something that I would list, most likely. But just to give you an example of what I would do, kind of my standard, take some pictures. I'm going to take one of the front, one of the spine there, one of the back. Cover's destroyed, I would replace that. And then one of the inside like that, and that would be my 4 pictures. I wouldn't probably do any more than that. And then I'll take a look, just a visual inspection. It's gonna be way too bright on that camera to show you anything. But this has got some light surface marks. I owned a record store. I managed record stores for, gosh, 15 years probably total. I can generally tell with a visual inspection whether I think something's going to play or not. This is one I would probably list in acceptable condition. I think it will play just fine, but it does have some visible, just light surface marks on it that would prevent it from being like good, very good, or whatever. But I have no doubt that it would play. I would disclose that in the description. Again, it's something you really can't take a picture of because it looks like that. It's just a reflection. So it's essentially pointless. And that would be it. Same with DVDs. Quick visual inspection. I do not play test these. When I did that, I have an 8,000 CD lot that I bought. I'd still be working on those had I tried to play test all those. So I generally do not do that. And in the literal thousands of CDs and DVDs I've sold, I've maybe had 1 or 2 where I got a message back that the item didn't play. So once you become familiar with what to look for in terms of the physical condition, I think that probably would work. And again, those 3 or 4 pictures are probably sufficient. If it's a new CD, I would take a picture of the top where it's got that security tape with the artist and title on it as well to show that that has not been broken. But other than that, that would be essentially my process for those. Why not raise the starting price on what? On a book we just did, or flesh that one out for me. Stop talking about birthdays a while ago. Yeah. You may find that only certain genres are worth it for you. Yeah. And I have pretty much stopped buying CDs now, except for if I can find old punk, really like black metal, death metal, the really more obscure genres are ones I still get. These were part of that big 8,000 CD lot that just happened to still be sitting here unlisted because they're not high value. I should probably just make a lot and sell these, whatever's over here, 8 or 10, and be done with it. But you can catch most of the surface marks of a CD when holding at an angle and using the camera flash. So there's a tip for you if you want to try that. Have you noticed that more people are showing up for the shows? Does Whatnot provide any metrics? Again, it varies. Like last week's science fiction show was very well attended. I think 88 people all in came out, which was pretty good. Last night's show was 33. They do provide metrics about how many people were at the show, what the peak viewership is, kind of what you'd see on like a YouTube live when you go back later and look at the stats. So you can see kind of what peak viewership is and then what total viewership is. And then of course they give you a breakdown of your sales and all that. So it's, from a metrics standpoint, it is actually pretty decent. On whatnot. Okay, I see what you're talking about. I've seen mixed things on that. I see some sellers that are pricing at what you would consider to be closer to market value, and their auctions aren't closing either because people are looking for a steal-in deal. I watched several of Max's shows. He starts everything at $1. He's got a huge audience. He's been doing it for years and has built up to that point. Whatnot, for their part, recommends that the value of the items that you have in a show should be between a minimum of $20 to $25, and they recommend dollar auction starts. So that's kind of the strategy that I started with. Yesterday, I tried $2 just to see if it made any difference. Obviously, I didn't sell any of them at $2. I've got some sales coming up where I'm going to try some maybe $2, $4, or $5 starts on books that I think have a little more value, just to see if it makes any difference or not. But yeah, there are a variety of different strategies over there for pricing, and for style. I see, like, I'm pre-listing everything. So when you come to my show, you could go into a show, like for instance, next Friday's science fiction show. The items in that show are already listed. They have a photo and a description and the whole 9 yards. So you could see what that is. I see other sellers that are just sitting like at a photo booth like this with just stacks of books, with the camera pointing at them and saying, if you see something you want me to run, just let me know and I'll pull that item out and we'll run it. That, to me, again, especially if you're going to do dollar starts, is you get one person that is interested in that thing. They say, yeah, run that. They're going to buy it for $1. So I'm not sure that's the strategy I would want to pursue. So again, it's just a wide variety. Because of the way that format works, there's so many different ways that you can do it. Really interesting what they've got going on over there. You're welcome. Do you ever list cassette tapes? I do on occasion. I have not bought a lot of cassette tapes over the years. I think I have a handful right now of some old, like, vintage Bob Dylan that's listed. It is one of those things that I really am not looking for when I'm out right now at estate sales. But cassette tapes are doing fairly well from what I hear from other sellers. So that is still an opportunity. Obviously, records are very strong right now. The issue I've found with records, and I've talked about it before, is record buyers can be really, really finicky about condition, and what you may consider to be good, they may consider to be fair. And it's record selling can be pretty dicey. I know a couple of guys who are really into record selling, and their comments are the same. You have to be so cautious with your grading of records. That is another area that I've kind of just strayed away from, because it's a lot of work to do well. Yeah, that's what we just kind of talked about there. Big Dre will also buy some wardrobe boxes from Uline to take clothing to the flea market. I figure that will be easier to just set the 6 of them up and people can just look through them. Yep, that's a great idea. If you've got a flea market that you go to do that. I'm a reseller. Hey, thanks for coming out. Cozy Corner Treasures. Been listening mostly. Just hit 60 this year and it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. Well, thank you. Catch me again next year. I'll let you know what I think. Thank you, Kapow Eagle, for the birthday wishes. Don't sweat the age numbers. They mean nothing after a while. Blew past 50, with only concern being what I can do. Still selling and writing. What's your fix for pirate ship? I assume you mean the recent Etsy change. For any of you that didn't catch the episode, Etsy is now partnered only with Shippo and ShipStation. If you had integrated Pirate Ship or any other service with Etsy previously, it will continue to work. But new sellers or new integrations, and I assume reset integrations, will no longer work correctly with Etsy. It will not import the information properly, and it will not export tracking numbers or mark or orders sold. As far as I know, there is no workaround other than to, if you want to continue to use it, to do what I do with Mercari and manually import manually copy and paste that stuff over into Pirate Ship so I can get it all into one order. The most sales I've ever had in one day on Etsy is 4. So cutting and pasting that number of orders into Pirate Ship probably would not be an undue hardship for me, but it's not ideal. Obviously, I'd rather have it just integrate like it always has. Etsy has not been very transparent about why they've chosen to do that. Pirate Ship, for their part, as I said in Monday's episode, they've reached out to Etsy, and as of today, as far as I know, they've not gotten a response on why they have been shut out. So it's really problematic. I talked about on Monday, these sites continue to do things that make it harder and harder for sellers to conduct their transactions in the way we want to do them. I get that if there's some commercial tie-up and Etsy is getting whatever, a rebate, a kickback, whatever you want to call it, from Shippo and ShipStation, from allowing them to be integrated with their site, that's a business decision that they have to make. But from where I'm sitting, I feel like, wouldn't you rather have all of your sellers be able to make their own choice and want to, again, list more items more frequently on your site because it's easier and seamless to do? Net, at the end of the day, won't that make you more money? I may be totally off base with that, but that's kind of where I'm at. I just don't understand that move at all. But as far as I know, other than manually copying and pasting into Pirate Ship from Etsy, assuming that your integration was not set up or is broken, is unfortunately the only way to go. Cozy Corner Treasures have a ton of cookbooks to sell on eBay. Is it worth to list in random groups or lot them up according to the type of cuisine? It varies, and some of that will be personal choice. I've got a box of them out there right now that I just picked up for free, of like the whatever, Nestle, Bisquick, whatever cookbooks from the 70s and 80s. If they sell for $5 or $6 plus shipping, I'll probably list them individually because I'm into them for nothing. They were free to me as part of an estate clean out. Otherwise, lotting them up by either brand or category does make sense. Two Pillsbury cookbooks, and I've done that in the past. 2 Pillsbury, 2 Duncan Hines, 2 Betty Crockers, or 3, or whatever it takes to get to a dollar amount that makes sense for you, is obviously another good option to get rid of them, especially if you got a bunch of them and you don't have much money in them. Cassette tapes are a pain. You have to actually test them. Maybe you should. I don't, and I talked about that. I don't know what it was. Was it 6 months ago? I sent a cassette tape out to a guy. I did not test it. I don't even have a cassette deck anymore, so I couldn't test it if I wanted to. And as it turned out, when the guy played it, when it got to the end, the tape pulled out of the spool on the other end and was essentially then unusable. I just gave the guy a refund. It was a $6 tape. It was no big deal. That is one of the downsides to tapes. It's one of the reasons I stopped doing 8-tracks altogether, because 8-tracks are notoriously fragile. They probably need to be tested. Finding good working equipment that won't damage those is another battle altogether. So, but good tip. Cassette tapes probably should be tested because they have a lot of like physical issues that some of the other media would not. And I know a lot of people will, like, I've got some friends that sell a lot of records and they actually listen to every record before they list it. Just have it on in the background as they're working on other stuff. So that's not a bad option either. Problem with cassette tapes, I have to listen to them to make sure they haven't stretched out over the years. Yep. Big Dre sold cookbooks separately, but switched to bulk lots, hoping to get rid of them quicker and get a little chunk of change versus small dollar amounts over a long period of time. And I talk about that quite a bit. Lotting up low value books, science fiction books, romance paperbacks, whatever they may be. If you end up getting a nice score on some of those, they may not be worth your time listing for $4, $5, $6 a piece. But if you do 2 or 3 or 4 or however many by author or by series, and you can get $12, $15, $18 and maybe flip them a little quicker, that is absolutely an option. Plus you end up saving money on shipping as well, because they'll go out for a combined shipping rate rather than $4.63 every time you got to ship them, which if you're doing free shipping, adds up. WTPG, agree with you, but sound business sense doesn't always apply. Absolutely. And if, I don't know, man, I feel like these platforms have gotten really, really, I talked about it the other day. Back in the day, most of the people who were decision makers at eBay were also sellers. They were working there and selling on the site, or they had sold on the site fairly recently before they went to work there. So they understood the daily workflow of sellers. And I feel like today these sites are mostly populated at C-suite level by executives who come from other businesses unrelated to secondhand goods, or from tech backgrounds, or from financial backgrounds. And those things naturally skew your perspective. You're looking at something from a purely financial standpoint. Again, looking at the Mercari fee change. There is every likelihood that an accountant said this would be a better move for us. Let's do it this way. But in the real world, where buyers and sellers are interacting and having to, decide what they want to do or whether they want to pay those fees, it may be a completely different thing. It's really interesting, and I appreciated the way David Lee has done outreach from Mercari to try to find out where buyers and sellers are. I'm not sure how much of that feedback has been taken on board because they're still kind of going down the same path, but that's another that's another matter. Big Dre says, I don't look for tapes, but earlier this year I found a Time Life 50s era lot of tapes for $3 and they sold quick for about 20. It pays sometimes to comp and look at stuff, especially as you become more familiar with any category. When you see something at a sale that is unusual, that is worth taking a minute to stop and say, hey, I don't think I've ever seen anything like this before, and look it up. And sometimes it's a nothing burger, and sometimes it's a $3 buy that you can flip real quick for 20 bucks. So kind of knowing those things obviously helps you. As Max said last week, the money is made in the buy. Finding the stuff kind of on the front end is where it's at. Right, on the Etsy, yeah. Or all of them, to be fair. Recently learned that eBay will reject sneakers if they don't agree that they are new, even if they are legit. Thankfully, the buyer was willing to repurchase the sneakers after I relisted as used. Interesting. Was this something that would have gone through their sneaker authentication program, or was this just a random pair of sneakers that wasn't even going to go through that program? I think they're probably really, really sensitive because of their push in that category for things that are new versus used. This week I had a buyer open a return, keep the item, and send me trash. I reported them, blocked them, and eBay refunded the buyer and myself. It was only an $8 item. Return fraud is no joke. It does happen. Knock wood, I've not ever had an instance where I got a brick back or got an item with a different serial number returned to me or anything like that. But it definitely does happen. There are instances where there are, why? Over an $8 item. That's crazy to me, but there you go. And I've heard mixed things about whether and how well eBay responds to those situations. So I'm glad they took care of you. I'm surprised they took care of the buyer as well. But Cozy Corner Treasure says, I've done well with children's cookbooks and special diet requirement cookbooks, but the single everyday cookbooks just sit. Yeah, some of those, again, like the Pillsbury, the Duncan Hines, there's a lot of them out there. So lotting those up may make more sense. The ones that I have had pretty good success with, they're not always super fast movers, are kind of the local school, PTA, local church cookbooks, where they have recipes from local residents. I get a lot of comments and messages back from people that my aunt, my grandma, my whoever had a recipe in this book. That's why I wanted it. I'm so glad you had it. So those are ones that I will genuinely look for when I'm out. But these, like the major brand ones anymore, this was part of an estate clean out, so I'll figure out what to do with them. But those are not ones that I look at individually any longer. Went to the authenticator, shipped them back to me because they said they were used, but to me they look new. Yeah, and to be fair, that's why the authenticators are there. I don't know how well trained those people are, but that is their job in essence, is to decide whether and if, and all's well that ends well, you were able to make the sale. Hopefully you still got the same amount of money out of them. But yeah, that process is, they claim in both sneakers and in trading cards that they have stopped a significant number of, let's say, inaccurately graded or rated items from getting to buyers. I don't know if they're being too aggressive or if they're spot on with it, but they said, and I know we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, the trading card thing, they have caught tens of thousands of cards and returned them to the seller. Cozy Corner Treasures, I just sold my husband's new sneakers for tennis that he never used. I didn't have an issue with eBay, thank goodness. Did those go through authentication, or was that just a regular sale? I don't know what the price point was, if they're just kind of regular sneakers and don't go through that process. Probably isn't a problem, but anything that goes to the authenticator, I think they're really, really being cautious about anything that looks even remotely used, not forwarding those on, because of course they're on the hook then. And eBay doesn't want to do that. So we are at a little over an hour. I usually like to try to keep these at an hour and some change. So if anybody has anything they would like to add one last time before we call it a day here, as always, I appreciate everybody coming out and spending a little bit of their morning with me. Sorry if I sound a little clogged up here. I've got the sinuses going big time today. Whew, rough. Happy birthday to me, right? You get sick. I haven't been sick all year. I'm supposed to meet some friends tonight to go out to dinner and whatever, and all I want to do is go to bed. Oh, goodness. High dollar, 95 listed, but they might have been on sale. Okay, yep. I don't sell anything in any of those categories that have authentication, so I've not had any experience with that. Gave them 25% off because they requested a better price since they were used, sold for $180, and then they used the 25% off coupon. So that's still, assuming you were into them at a good price, that's still a pretty good flip, but yeah. And again, obviously not ideal. You do your best to inspect an item and you think they're new. Were they in a box? What was the condition that you got them in? But you do everything you think is right, and then the authenticator says, no, these are going back. I can see where that would be really frustrating. And again, I'm going to, I think it's Saturday, there's another local eBay meetup, and it's run by some people who are big time sneaker and collectible clothing wear, sportswear sellers. So I'll have a little chat with them too about what their experience has been with authentication, and if they're seeing like a high number of items come back. They claim they're doing almost $750,000 a year in sales in kind of streetwear and sportswear and shoes, sneakers. So be real curious what their feedback is on that program. Yeah. Yep. Unless you absolutely know, like you bought them at the outlet store or whatever. But even then, you go to a shoe store, someone may have tried those shoes on before, you get them, you buy them, you think they're new, your plan is to resell them. They've got just that little bit of dust or whatever on the sole from having been worn as somebody, took them for a test drive. And the authenticator gets them and they say, nah, these have been worn. They've been worn one time for a 10-foot walk and you can't sell them as new. It's one of the reasons I don't mess around in that category. You don't have that problem with old books very often. Just watch them send them back if they think they're new. But I list it as new. Yep. Again, thank you so much to everybody who came out today. We will do this again next week. Assuming there's some stuff to talk about, we'll have the normal episode on Monday with reselling news and some what sold. If you're interested in coming out to the Whatnot auction, I'll be doing a science fiction paperback auction Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern over on Whatnot, 20 science fiction paperbacks. Those are already loaded. If you are a sci-fi fan, go take a look at those. With that, my friends, I think I'm going to call it a day here. Again, thanks so much for coming out. And now it's time to sell. Thanks, guys. You have been listening to the Galaxy CDs Rocks and Flips Reseller Talk podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you again next time.